Last Night in Soho is the latest film from director Edgar Wright. This is also a film that he has written with Krysty Wilson-Cairns, who previously worked on season 3 of Penny Dreadful and 1917 movie. They came out 2 years ago now. Holy shit, yeah, 2019. Fuck. Oh man. It's 2021. Shit. Time really does fly, guys. It honestly really does. Which is appropriate, talking about time, for a movie that kind of concerns time travel. You have a girl named Ellie, played by Thomasin McKenzie, who's going to a London school of fashion, completely out of her comfort zone, never done this before, but she's pursuing her dreams. One night, she awakens in a dream that is set in the 60s, London 60s, which is her favorite aesthetic, her favorite thing. She starts to follow this girl named Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who wants to be an entertainer. She's a singer. She wants to, perform and be celebrated for her art, and Ellie starts to really grow fondness for following this girl. And then some other stuff starts to happen, revealing a tragic past of Anya Taylor-Joy's Sandy, and Thomasin McKenzie is wrapped up all in it. I was excited for this movie as soon as it was announced, not just because it's an Edgar Wright movie, but because it's an Edgar Wright horror movie. It seems like he's always kind of flirted with the idea of doing some horror stuff, mostly pinpointed in the Cornetto trilogy, like Shaun of the Dead, obviously, but even Hot Fuzz and The World's End kind of has its moments where I was like, Edgar Wright could probably make a really great horror movie because there's some elements here where the filmmaking absolutely works. So as soon as that was announced, I was like, I am all in on this, baby. Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors of all time, honestly. He might actually be like the top of my list, to be honest, because I know he hasn't made as many movies as like a Nolan or Spielberg even, or like Scorsese, all these other people, but every single movie he's made I've given a perfect score to. I've absolutely loved all of them. I've walked out inspired, like refreshed, and just in love with movies every single time. My favorite of his is actually The World's End, which I don't think it's a lot of people's favorites. I think more people either lean on Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, even Scott Pilgrim, but I really love The World's End. I think that really is kind of the peak of what I love about Edgar Wright and his movie making. So obviously I went into this very excited. I had a lot of expectations going in. It was honestly my most anticipated movie for this fall season, even more than Dune, which might be blasphemous for some, but I was just that excited to see what Edgar Wright and Krysty Wilson-Cairns were cooking up here, and I was really blown away by this movie. I absolutely adored it. I don't know if, as far as like ranking goes, I think this might be my least favorite Edgar Wright movie, but then again, ranking movies is kind of hard for me to do, at least nowadays, because it's kind of like, sure, ranking, I understand the appeal of it, but I'm kind of at this point where I just kind of want to celebrate movies and not really be concerned about which is better or not. So I may not technically 100% know where it ranks as far as the other Edgar Wright movies go, but I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was wonderful. There's a moment where I was like, this movie is definitely going to continue to exceed my expectations, and I saw this in Dolby, the AMC Dolby. And for the first 24 minutes, they even had like a notice for it outside. They were saying like, hey, in the first 24 minutes, they intentionally are not using all of the audio channels. At the 24-minute mark, something like that, that's when it's going to kick in. And at first, I honestly, I didn't notice it. Like, I think it was because I just wasn't thinking about it at that time. But once that minute mark hit, and you could very obviously tell the audio channels were like kicking up, and they just really were utilizing the cinema sound system. I was like, this is absolute perfection. I am in love with this movie. It's probably going to continue to impress me, and it did. I really like how Edgar Wright, as a filmmaker, he goes into everything with a specific style in mind, and he is not going to change his style for anybody, It's not like just because he's making a horror movie, I'm now going to completely change up my filmmaking style to try to match horror movies. It's not a director who's constantly flip-flopping what they do with movies. Edgar Wright is very consistent, but just it's something that can work for any genre. He knows exactly how to pull that off. This movie's legitimately pretty startling at points, and I think he pulls off a lot of the horror stuff incredibly well. There's a lot of fantastic visuals in this movie. The cinematographer, I believe, if I read this correctly, he's the same cinematographer for the movie Oldboy, which is kind of fantastic. There's a lot of wonderful shots in this. They utilize the colors and the aesthetic of like the set design incredibly well, the costumes that everyone is wearing. It's a really great balance of 60s and then cutting back to the modern day where it looks clean. It's kind of like gray and kind of drab, but it's more clean and kind of polished looking. It's not like, oh, so dreary, blah, blah, blah. It's more so just fine, you know, but then going back to this time period, this romanticized time period, everything is just, color is exploding off the screen. Every single chance they have to really illustrate a color, it's there and you notice it. It's wonderful. They really do a great job of creating this wonderful aesthetic, this period of time captured here. They don't really do a lot of the, like, hey, it's the 60s, look at this, look at this, look at this, like I thought they were maybe going to. Like, obviously there's the Thunderball thing and there's a couple things you'll notice, but it's not a movie that's kind of like a just hopscotch through 60s cultural references. It's like Matt Smith even has a line like, this is kind of the closest people get to their dreams, almost kind of implying like, hey, if you want to see more 60s references to stuff, this might be all you get, you know? We're mostly kind of using this for the story, the aesthetic of the story, and I really do like that. I'm glad the movie didn't get distracted, essentially. I like what this movie has to say about romanticized nostalgia, you know? A lot of people like to say like, hey, this time period was the best, or this time period was better because it's older, the music's better, stars, you know, yada yada yada. And this movie does kind of start off as like a, hey, you're following Anya Taylor-Joy go on like this journey to achieving her dreams and being a performer. You're seeing all the building blocks happen, but then at a certain point, once you're kind of into it, like, yeah, this is gonna go great, guys, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, actually, here's a lot of the stuff that's actually kind of going on behind the scenes. It's showing like, hey, even though you like a lot of stuff from this time period, just like any other time period, there's a messy things to it. There's stuff that we don't see, stuff that we don't know, and concerning Anya Taylor-Joy's character specifically, like what specifically she's going through, there's a lot that's kind of gross and disturbing, like, oh no, you know? And I really love that idea of actually looking at nostalgia and going like, yeah, it's fun, and you can take a lot of stuff from that to be inspired by, to really love, but you can't not recognize its many faults and acting like, you know, one time period is better than the other, because it's all kind of messy when you really examine something, especially when examining the culture of things with specific groups in that time period. I don't want to give too much away of like what the mystery, the overall story that Sandy is going through is, but it was really intriguing and really fascinating, and it made you really care for that character. Anya Taylor-Joy does a really fantastic job too. But also Thomasin McKenzie, who is the actual lead of this movie, she does a really fantastic job of being the audience character, reacting to everything, but also combined with that, being able to relate to Anya Taylor-Joy's sensibilities of trying to go out of their comfort zone, achieve their dreams, really push themselves, but also having her recognize a lot of the stuff that's happening with Sandy can still be found in little increments in the present day, you know, and being kind of terrified by that, trying to figure out what actually happened to her, how she can help avenge her. I think this movie does a really fantastic job in that sense of not only having just a cool aesthetic, a cool idea for a story, because it is a really cool idea, but also having two characters that you care about, that you understand how they actually connect to the overall theme of the movie, what it does have to say about dream chasing and nostalgia. Matt Smith does an excellent job here too. I don't want to give away too much of what his character is all about, but he does a really great job of having the kind of 60s look of like a well-to-do kind of guy who's kind of a smooth-talking ladies' man who can charm any woman in the room, but because of the way he plays that, you know, it's a very specific kind of performance that can very easily transition, shift to something else that his character is mostly about once this persona of his kind of fades and he really reveals himself. That's all I can really say, but he does a fantastic job with that. Anywhere else, sometimes people handle shifts in character kind of clumsily. It comes out of nowhere. You don't really buy it because of the actor, but, you know, they wrote it well. Matt Smith performed it well. It's some really great stuff. I feel like this is the first time I'm actually, like, seeing a Matt Smith performance, because I've heard he's a good actor just because people talk about him from The Crown, Doctor Who. I've not watched any of those. I've only seen him pop up in Terminator Genesis, so this is like the first time I'm like actually watching him act and, you know, be a character, and I thought he was really fantastic. I would love to see him in more stuff because he's really got a great charm to him. Michael Ajao, who's from Attack the Block, a movie I really like, he is really good in this too. He's kind of like the supportive friend to Thomasin McKenzie, who might also have a thing for her too. They might have, you know, some interest in each other. It's just a really sweet role. It's something that obviously it flirts on the side of like, okay, here come the stock characters that not only do you see in horror movies, but just movies in general. But at that point, it kind of depends on, are they implementing implemented well into the story. How do they interact with the main character? What do they mean to them? And how does the actor do? And Michael Ajow does a really great job. He's really sweet, you know, and this movie, it's not a comedy, but it does have its moments where the humor does work. You know, there's one joke in particular. It's more so a sight gag combined with like the editing of Edgar Wright. That's all I'll say. You know, he's utilizing the beats of music, and it made me laugh hysterically. You know, Edgar Wright once again having a wonderful soundtrack and also a wonderful musical score by Stephen Price to accompany everything going on here. You know, he just matches everything so well. There's that incredible dance. Obviously, you saw a bit of it in the trailer where Anya Taylor-Joy does a little twirl, and we go around Matt Smith, and she becomes Thomasin McKenzie. But that, you know, goes on, and they've said, like, hey, that one shot of the twirl was CG. Everything else is kind of practical. And I was like, that's amazing that they pulled that off. And a lot of, like, the mirror acting, too. Like, when, you know, Anya Taylor-Joy's on one side, Thomasin McKenzie's on the other. A lot of that is practical as well, which was awesome to see them pull off. Terrence Stamp has a fun role here. I really love the way he delivers dialogue. He was a really fun addition. Diana Rigg, which this movie is her last performance in, she even did a good job in this. She actually was in it a lot more than I was expecting. I was kind of going in expecting, oh, she's like a cameo, gotcha. But she actually does have like a pretty solid supportive role, and I was like, she's really good in this. Rest in peace, obviously, because she is such a talent even still. Even like the bitchy mean girl kind of character worked for me where normally it wouldn't. And I think it's because early on Edgar Wright and Krysty Wilson-Cairns kind of showed you exactly kind of what she was all about from the get-go. Like, hey, she's kind of like a fake supportive kind of friend. You know, she kind of sees herself as like a queen bee. She wants all the attention for herself. She will go as far as like taking someone's pain when they're trying to share and trying to connect with it, but only in a sense to really stand out and kind of be like, well, actually, like, yeah, you're saying you've had a previous pain, but I've also had that, so yeah. And in that sense, they painted it in a way that I found more interesting to watch than other movies that do it. It's, I think, more realistic as well, kind of showing like, you know, they kind of do poke fun of like the artist type characters, how they, you know, say certain things and act in certain ways, and her in particular just kind of being jealous, but also trying to show fake support, you know. So I actually really like that. And in a lot of other movies, it would just be, you know, a random character who would look at our main character and go, boo, you know, and that would be it for the rest of the movie. But in this movie, I thought they set it up fairly well, so I was able to continue to enjoy it when they popped up more as the movie went on. Overall, I really love this movie. I don't really have a lot of complaints to it. I think everything from Edgar Wright's style to the writing, the characters, the dialogue, the music, everything about this movie I really enjoyed, and I can't really think of one thing I disliked about this. Even the third act, I know a lot of people, the stock complaint at this point is, the third act didn't really work for me. It kind of goes off the rails and becomes unfocused, but honestly, I didn't really feel that way. I can totally understand why some people might find it a bit more conventional in comparison to maybe the rest of the movie's execution, but I still think it worked for the overall narrative, and that's all I can really say, you know. I can't really think of anything else to say other than I still really enjoyed it. I'm gonna give Last Night in Soho an A+. I love this movie to death. It's my favorite movie of the year so far. If you're going to see something at the theater for Halloween, pick this over Halloween Kills or Antlers. I saw that too, and it was okay. Got some gnarly kills, but it's just kind of an okay movie with a solid theme, but kind of poor execution. Last Night in Soho is way better. I think it excels on every single level. But if you've seen Last Night in Soho already, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.